So yesterday, which was June 6th, Piers Morgan and Parker had a bit of a back and forth on the topic of trans athletes. A few things that were said I think are incorrect, so I am going to go through the clip and try to respond as best as I can to hopefully try to clear some things up for Parker. I'm going to try to take the most charitable interpretation of what he's saying, though I will admit there's a couple points here where I have a little bit of confusion on the point that he's trying to make. I will also be referencing the expert declaration of Gregory A. Brown in the United States District Court for the Southern District of West Virginia as I deliver the rebuttal, because in the expert declaration, there's a bunch of really good information that really, I think, provides a lot of clarity around this issue and the advantages that males have over females, even when the males are on testosterone suppression and on cross-sex hormones such as estrogen. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and start the clip.
I can't mention the person on the panel, but specifically in terms of trans people are not specifically going to be harmful towards women in these particular spaces, given that they've met the conditions of multiple years of HRT.
Have you been okay? Have you been okay? Sorry. Hang on.
Please, let me finish.
Parker, you can't make it. Parker. Literally, as you've said this today, it's been revealed.
I'm finishing, Piers.
Today,
Piers, I'm trying to
wait
explain.
a minute.
I'm trying to explain, Piers.
You talked about safety. Literally today, the Algerian gold medal winner in the Paris Olympics women's boxing has been revealed to be a man who should never have been competing.
Piers, can I speak?
That's why.
You know how people feel when they're on your panels and you mute them.
Can I speak without interruption, please?
All right, answer.
I've been incredibly nice on this panel. I would love to be able to speak without interruption. Is that okay, Piers?
Yes, but answer my question.
Yeah, I was trying to answer the question. You cut me off. So specifically, I don't think trans people in these spaces would be harmful after multiple years of HRT and or not going through a male puberty, as I've seen no good evidence.
Okay, keep in mind, he said multiple years of HRT and or not going through male puberty, which from my understanding would mean that he thinks that a male who went through male puberty and now as an adult is undergoing multiple years of HRT. He doesn't think that that individual would have an unfair advantage over biological females.
From any scientific studies that indicate that there would be an unfair biological advantage at that point.
What are you talking about, man?
Listen, I'm still explaining.
Parker, you're talking complete gibberish,
Can I please finish?
Imran Khalif has literally just been exposed as a biological male who won Olympic gold in women's boxing and beat up an Italian boxer, woman, so badly she quit in 43 seconds and said she thought she was going to die in the ring. So the whole argument you just put forward is literally disproved by a news story today. That's the point I was making to you. Of course it's dangerous when you allow biological men to get in a boxing ring and beat up women. It is dangerous.
Piers, has that person been through multiple years of HRT?
I don't know. I don't care.
Then they haven't met my set of criteria. So how is that a critique of my worldview if they haven't met the set of criteria that I mentioned? Can I please finish? Can I please mention? Right. So again, let me please finish. Right. I am saying if they meet this set of criteria, then they can play. And there's nothing unfair biologically speaking that you can identify.
This is where you're so deluded.
Nothing. What's crazy to me is like he's not really even leaving much room for nuance. He's saying that there's nothing unfair about it as long as they've been on multiple years of testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones. Nothing, not a single thing he's claiming, which is crazy. And we'll get to that in a second here.
Speaking,
you're so deluded because even if you have all the treatment, you still retain the body mass, the muscle mass, the lung capacity. You retain all the biological advantages of being born
not after multiple years of HRT.
Okay, just one thing there. When Piers says that you retain all of the biological advantages of being a man, that part is not true. Okay, you don't retain every advantage in full if you are on multiple years of testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones. I mean, just from the testosterone suppression, your testosterone levels are going to go down. That obviously would be a disadvantage compared to if you weren't on, for example, that testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones. So it's not true you retain every advantage in full, but you do retain significant advantages to the point where it is absolutely objectively unfair to allow men in women's sports, even if the man is on testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones. So I will point out there that Piers is incorrect that you retain every advantage in full, but he would be correct in stating that men retain significant advantages even if they're on testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones. And again, we'll get to the data on this in a second.
Not after multiple years of HRT.
Yes, you do.
Wait, do you want to bet, Piers? Piers, put money on it. You said you retain every biological advantage.
Muscle
given
mass.
That you have gone through multiple years of HRT.
Capacity.
You don't think muscle mass?
You want to bet your entire
goes down?
savings of your entire life
Let's
that I'm right
Piers,
and you're wrong?
Piers, let's bet $1,000 right now that there are lower biological advantages that would specifically exist given that someone goes through multiple years of HRT, right, relative to estrogen.
No, you're missing my point.
Take that bet.
No, you're missing my point.
Are you going to accept the bet? Yes or no?
You can have all the HRT treatment you like.
Piers.
You can have all the testosterone. But
He's not going to accept it.
So just one thing here. Okay. One part of what Parker says here that I'm not totally sure if I understand correctly is if he's arguing, and I'm going to put the graph up so you can see what I'm referencing. Okay. Graph's going to be right here. And this is just a made up data. I just asked ChatGPT to make it. So this data is not real. I just wanted it to illustrate the curve so I can tell you what I'm trying to figure out what Parker's saying here, because I'm not totally sure if I'm understanding what he's saying correctly. I can't tell if he's saying that he believes the graph of distribution of strength, height, take whatever you want here, muscle mass, whatever. If he's saying that he actually thinks that the graph for males who aren't on testosterone suppression, aren't on estrogen, will shift left if they go on testosterone suppression and estrogen relative to the males who aren't on it, or if he's saying that it'll shift left so far as to match up perfectly with females. Because there's a big difference there. It's one thing to say, yes, the curve is going to shift left, right? The distribution of things like strength, lung capacity, all that, if that's all going to shift left, it's one thing to say that, but acknowledge it's not going to shift so far left as to match up with the female distribution. It's a completely different thing to say it's going to not only shift left, but it's going to shift left so far as to match up perfectly with the female distribution and not give any advantage whatsoever, and take your pick on this, strength, height, whatever. Okay, those are two very, very different claims. Right. And again, we'll get to the data on this in a second. But I did want to point out that I'm not totally sure what Parker's trying to argue there, because if he's willing to say that, yes, it shifts left, but not so far as to match up perfectly with female, then in my opinion, that's basically just ceding the argument that it is unfair to allow men in women's sports, even if they're on testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones. So I'm assuming that he actually thinks that the distribution curve for every single aspect of biology that could give a male an advantage, he actually thinks all the distribution curves shift all the way to match up perfectly with female as soon as you just get on cross-sex hormones and testosterone suppression treatments, which is obviously not the case. It doesn't match up perfectly with the female distribution even when you get on these things. Something like height isn't going to change dramatically when you get on cross-sex hormones as an adult after already having gone through male puberty. The height distribution doesn't just magically shift over to match up with female. In fact, from what I understand, there's really not actually an impact on height once you actually are an adult, went through male puberty, and then you get on testosterone suppressing treatments and cross-sex hormones. I mean, one way to simply think about this is if you were to take all of the NBA players and suddenly give them cross-sex hormones and testosterone suppression, every single one of them would still be better than the best WNBA player. Every single one of them would still beat Caitlin Clark like 11-1 in a game of one-on-one, even if they're on testosterone suppressing treatments and cross-sex hormones. Also keep in mind that someone who didn't go on cross-sex hormones or testosterone suppression treatments until they're an adult still had the benefit of, at least 18 years of training as a man with increased testosterone counts. So, his argument here really does not make a whole lot of sense to me, but I'll let it play and then we'll get into more data at the end here.
Let me answer. I'll tell you the bet I'll make. If you want to bet the $1,000, if you want to bet the $1,000 that if you go through testosterone reduction treatment and the rest of it, that you come out of it with a reduced muscle mass or lung capacity or the other things that give men an advantage, take that bet for me.
Yeah. So I will bet after multiple years of HRT, specifically relating to estrogen, right, there is a reduction in muscle mass. You want to take that bet, Piers?
It's bullshit. Andrew Wilson.
All right. So one thing on this, let's go to the expert declaration from Dr. Gregory A. Brown. So point 150, developmental changes for which there is no apparent means of reversal and no literature suggesting reversibility also include multiple contributors to the male cardiovascular advantage, including diaphragm placement, lung and trachea size, which Piers mentioned lung size, or he mentioned lung capacity, and heart size, and therefore pumping capacity. Okay, if we go back to point 149, it is obvious that some of the physiological changes that occur during growth and development across puberty cannot be reversed. Some of these irreversible physiological changes are quite evident in photographs that have recently appeared in news of transgender competitors and female events. These include skeletal configuration advantages, including longer and larger bones that give height, weight, and leverage advantages to men, more advantageous hip shape and configuration as compared to women. Okay, these are things that would not reverse with cross-sex hormones and testosterone suppression, right? Your height isn't going to magically go from, being 5'10" to 5'8" just because you get on cross-sex hormones and testosterone suppression, nor will you suddenly have a female pelvis shape if you've already gone through male puberty and are getting on cross-sex hormones and testosterone suppression. You're still going to have a male pelvis shape in contrast to a female pelvis shape, which gives a disadvantage in sport. Another thing too is, even just having a period versus not a period is obviously going to be a disadvantage to women. And like I mentioned earlier, if you went through 18 years as a male, you went through male puberty, you had 18 years of training as a man. That is a huge advantage because you're going to be able to train harder, train for longer periods. You're going to be less susceptible to injury as a man. So definitely going to have a huge advantage being a man. Now, Parker, it seems like, is focusing in on muscle mass, but even that doesn't work. If I go to point 153, Dr. Gregory A. Brown says, multiple studies have found that muscle mass decreases modestly or not at all in response to testosterone suppression. Knox et al. Report that healthy young men did not lose significant muscle mass or power when their circulating testosterone levels were reduced to 8.8 nanomoles per liter, lower than the 2015 IOC guideline of 10 nanomoles per liter for 20 weeks. Keep in mind, Parker was arguing for multiple years of testosterone suppression, so that point alone isn't very relevant. Then we have Gorin found that in spite of muscle surface area reduction induced by androgen deprivation, after 1 year, the mean muscle surface area in male to female transsexuals remained significantly greater than in untreated female to male transsexuals. An earlier study by Gorin found that after 1 year of testosterone suppression, muscle mass at the thigh was reduced by only about 10%, exhibited, quote, no further reduction after 3 years of hormones, and remained significantly greater than in his sample of untreated women. Van Caneghem et al. Found that muscle cross-section in the calf and forearm decreased only trivially 4% and 1% respectively after 2 years of testosterone suppression. All right, so pretty clearly you're not going to get a massive drop in muscle mass. You will get a statistically significant drop, right? But it's not going to ultimately move the distribution of muscle mass graph so far to the left that aligns with females, okay? A male who went through male puberty and then gets on testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormone is still going to have, on average, more muscle mass than females. Now, you also have to keep in mind that part of the reason for this is that he went through male puberty and his bones are now going to have a larger surface area on them. And no amount of cross-sex hormones and testosterone suppression is going to change the surface area that's on his bones, right? Just like it doesn't change the length of the bones. It doesn't make them shorter. Okay, and because there's more surface area on the bones, you can actually fit more muscle on the individual, right? So you can't just get on these testosterone suppressing treatments and cross-sex hormones and suddenly mitigate in full the advantage that males have in sport. Okay, you might be able to shift the graph to the left in a couple of areas, such as, for example, muscle mass, strength, things like that, but it's not going to shift so far to the left to align perfectly with females, especially when it comes to something like height, which gives an advantage in sports like basketball and volleyball. Even on muscle mass, Parker is incorrect. Males still have an advantage over females in regards to muscle mass, even if they're on testosterone suppressing treatments and cross-sex hormones. Another example of this, if he doesn't like the points that I just made, okay, if we go back to point 130 and 131, we have Roberts et al., and again, I'm quoting from the expert declaration of Dr. Gregory A. Brown. Roberts et al. Have recently published an interesting longitudinal study, one arm of which considered biological males who began testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones while serving in the United States Air Force. One measured performance criterion was push-ups per minute, which, while not exclusively, primarily tests arm strength under repetition. Before treatment, the biological male study subjects who underwent testosterone suppression could do 45% more push-ups per minute than the average for all Air Force women under the age of 30. After between 1 and 2 years of testosterone suppression, this group could still do 33% more push-ups per minute. Further, the body weight of the study group did not decline at all after 1 to 2 years of testosterone suppression. In fact, rose slightly and was approximately 24 pounds higher than the average for Air Force women under the age of 30. This means that the individuals who had undergone at least 1 year of testosterone suppression were not only doing 1/3 more push-ups per minute, but were lifting significantly more weight with each push-up. After 2 years of testosterone suppression, the study sample in Roberts et al. Was only able to do 6% more push-ups per minute minute than the Air Force female average, but their weight remained unchanged from their pre-treatment starting point and thus about 24 pounds higher than the Air Force female average. As Roberts et al. Explained, as a group, trans women weigh more than cis women, thus trans women will have a higher power output than cis women when performing an equivalent number of push-ups. Therefore, our study may underestimate the advantage in strength that trans women have over cis women. Okay, so we see even after multiple years of testosterone suppression, still a strength advantage is retained by the males, even when they're on the testosterone suppressing treatments. Okay, so overall, it's really abundantly obvious that males do retain an advantage over females in sport, even if they're on testosterone suppressing treatments and cross-sex hormones. So what Parker's saying here, I don't think it holds up to the evidence. He said that he hadn't seen any evidence that shows that males still retain that advantage, even if they're on multiple years of testosterone suppressing treatments and cross-sex hormones. I think the evidence shown in the expert declaration from Dr. Gregory A. Brown is pretty compelling. So hopefully, if he takes a look at this video, he's able to sort of reevaluate his position in light of new evidence that maybe he hasn't seen before. And then hopefully he would take on the position that it is actually unfair to allow men and women's sports, even if they are on testosterone suppression and cross-sex hormones, because I do believe that someone who looks objectively at the evidence would come to that conclusion. So hopefully he sees this video. Hopefully he changes his position. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider subscribing to my channel and dropping a comment, letting me know what content you want me to make in the future. With that being said, hope you guys all have a great day.